Ready to go.
Thank you so much. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for attending the July 30th, 2021 edition of the Financial Emergency Board meeting. I know it's been an extraordinary year, and I want to take a moment just right off the bat to say thank you to Governor DeSantis and his leadership over the last year and a half, making sure that our state has as good a recovery and then reemergence from the pandemic and then the economic devastation that was associated with it. By and large, we continue to recover well ahead of other states nationally. And I just wanted to say, recognize that here at the state capitol, it's not lost on us that other localities and states have a much different experience over the last 12 to 15 months than we had here in the state of Florida, largely attributed to the fact that we've remained open for business and willing to accommodate that growth as well as personal responsibility for safety. So thank you for that. So in that vein, I wanted to say, I know because of a lot of that experience over the last 12 months, it's been a moment since we've had one of these meetings. I'm truly grateful this morning to see everybody. I know we try to get together collectively here in Tallahassee in a joint meeting room for much of the meetings we've had over the last almost 5 years now. But this format actually works really well because it's nice to see everybody's face. And, with any luck, this attendance is somewhat easier logistically. So really just wanted to express my continued gratitude for everybody's time, commitment, scheduling. Those of us who've been here for many years now know that this is a journey. And I'm somewhat convinced by my own personal experiences that if you don't love the process of something, you really can't love the eventual outcome. And we're certainly still in the process of working through the outlines of what it is to actually be in a financial emergency. And then, the sometimes arduous, sometimes gleeful, sometimes, effort to actually make your way day by day by day, to do the process, to get things right, to demonstrate clearly that you have managed not only to come out of a financial emergency in the classic sense, but also understand what it is to have effective governance, which I think is the understanding lesson here. So I don't want to belabor those points. I know we have a lot to talk about today. So Brian, if we could, let's just call the roll real quick, and we'll move on.
Roll call. Please announce if you're present. Andrew R. Collins.
I'm here. Thank you.
Angela Connect.
I'm here.
Kim Mills.
Here.
Renita Nelson. JD Patterson.
Here.
Frank Rollison.
Here.
Thank you so much. So I know Renita is not here on the call just yet. We do need her presence to establish a quorum. So typically what we would do right now is to review the meeting minutes from the last time we met, July 14th, 2020. Go ahead, Brian.
We have 5. We have a quorum.
Okay, well, let's roll on then. This will be easier. I thought we might need all 6. So having established that quorum, we can sort of move on to reviewing the minutes from last time we met. Hopefully you've had a chance to review those in the package that Brian sent out. And if you're ready, or certainly entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved by Frank.
Thank you, Frank. Do I have a second?
Second back again.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, I don't think there's any discussion to be had there, so let's call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Let the record show that the minutes have passed, and we will annotate those. So next on the agenda is a report from the governor's designee and a few presentations. So I'll turn over the microphone to Brian. Thank you.
At this point, hopefully you guys have all had a chance to read the governor's report or Governor Designee's report. Rather than belabor it and read it into the record, I'm just going to go through the highlights of it. The big thing during the last year, generally since the last meeting, is the city has made more progress than it had at any other time since this began. The city got in its 5-year plan. the city has finished multiple audits. The last audit having been unmodified, and we're having a stronger opinion from the independent auditors as to the legitimate position of its finances. And they are showing a dramatic improvement and showing some issues that the city is currently addressing. The 5-year plan was approved without change, as has every budget for the last year and budget amendment. Overall, we're showing that the city's governance is appropriately budgeting and spending money. The budget amendments we're receiving are more than reasonable to address either slight changes, evidence where historical spending has either changed, or brief emergencies, or just rather to just manage and maintain their books. In other words, showing proper governance of their funds. The city has been able to maintain their budget. And overall, the governor's designee has been happy. We've met weekly with the city. Those meetings have been the most informative. There is no question as to the candor of the current administration. This is the closest that there has been a cooperation with the state, and currently information is flowing. The advice coming from the governor's designee is well received, as is the information received from the city's administration. I don't think there is a point of issue within the city that we are not being advised of, and that the governor's designee's opinion has not been heard. We have not had to call for an financial emergency board meeting, as the city has been run fairly well for the last year and a half. We have no real complaints. Technical assistance rendered. There's a whole list of them. There's probably not a point in going through them directly, but the biggest thing is the city currently has a vendor that's assisting their finance department. Through their work, the city has almost turned around the finance department. There still are specific recommendations we have for improving it. We feel that the city needs to make a final determination on its at least near-term future. That is part of one of the presentations. But as for the work done by the vendor, an estimate, the vendor has saved the city about $1.5 million, either by completing audits, assisting with negotiations with the bank that was holding funds, or just reconciling the books. I would say the biggest thing that we have learned in the last year, while there were audits that indicated the city had not reconciled their books for certain accounts, with the new administration has become clear, the city almost completely stopped reconciling its books after 2015 for almost 100 accounts, or it happened sporadically. Furthermore, there's indication that certain accounts hadn't been completely or properly reconciled dating back to 2009. With this fact, it became clear that some of the financial reporting from the city just did not have the transparency that we would require to have full faith in the information that was provided. So for the last year and a half, the governor's designee has not required the monthly revenue and expenditure reports for multiple reasons. One being time. The city has been completing audits, reconciling the books. So on any given day, they're reconciling today's transactions and the transactions that occurred 2 years ago and maybe even 4 years ago, all on the same day. And they did that every day for the last year. At the same time, the Auditor General has returned. There's another operational audit that's taken up a lot of their time. The city is fairly lean, and some of the forces being pushed upon the city is probably stretching that administration thin, to no fault of their own. It's just a lot to do. The Financial Emergency Board, the rules that are set up require a lot of information to be provided for us. The Auditor General is going to require a lot of attention. Their own audits are going to require a lot of attention. And then their own finance department is going to require a lot of attention just to catch up. For this, the vendor has been a godsend that's helped them move forward. And in certain regards, I think more credit should be given to their work. And I believe that more money needs to be invested in their finance department. In order to get out of financial emergency, the city needs to almost wholesale rehabilitate its financial infrastructure. And this is a process that has been delayed probably since 2016 with measures that were done based on affordability, but we've reached a point where a more decisive decision needs to be made and a more wholesale change needs to be made to get them out. There is an avenue for them getting out of financial emergency within a couple of years, but it's going to require some change and some investment. We'll get more into some of the specifics that's required, but that's kind of where we are. As for their invoices and budget, like I said, we've approved every budget they've made for the last year or budget amendment without any changes. We're seeing clear transparency. As for spending, their spending is within their means. And in fact, the last year they've spent less per month than they had the year before. And in 2019, actually the city was able to get a lot done that moved them forward. Despite COVID, the city got a lot done and are in a better position. Some of it's due to things outside their control. For instance, Amazon moving in and adding to the tax roll, but it's to the benefit of the city. They were able to manage it appropriately. Resolutions and ordinances. So the work of the commission, I think at this point in time, we've received, because of updating some recent information, we've probably received close to 24 ordinances and probably 110 resolutions. The governor's designee has not had to object or request changes on any of them. Everything seems to be fiscally sound or moves the city forward. And then there's only a handful of them that have, no fiscal impact, but are specific to the uniqueness of the city. There are no objections. There were a couple complaints that have been received. They've been forwarded to your attention. None of them seem to have a specific fiscal impact. Most of them have been reviewed and either we didn't find enough information substantiated or we found no information at all, to the point that we are not going to belabor the point or bring it up. And otherwise, the governor's designee has got 3 presentations we put together, each one kind of giving a brief background, a brief discussion, and then with specific recommendations. We feel that all 3 of them will either add to the efficiency of the city's operations or add to the city's ability to handle its fiscal finances and increase its overall transparency to the city and to the state. So if you are willing, I can move on to the first presentation.
Yes, thank you so much. Perfect.
Everybody see my screen?
Yes.
So the city entered financial emergency in 2016. While the city has made significant progress, ultimately the city must develop and operate a reliable and effective financial accounting and reporting system that is established by statute. Currently, the city's financial system remains unreliable as it is still attempting to reconcile bank accounts timely, provide reliable reporting, update office policies and procedures, fill open vacancies and critical positions, and finalize prior year audits. At this point, I don't feel any of these are the problem or issues created by the current administration. It's basically the hole that was dug in 2015 and prior, and the city's not working through. At this point, we're no longer in the blame game. We're no longer determining why there's a problem. We're dealing with it. I feel the administration is properly dealing with it, but some changes would, I think, help them accelerate their progress. The governor's designee requested the FEB consider this presentation, the included policies and procedure proposals that are addressed within, and consider making a formal recommendation to the city to adopt. Right. Pursuant to statute, the city is required to declare itself in financial emergency. The governor then reviews the issue and then makes a determination as to whether assistance is available. If assistance is available or would be assistive, then the city is considered in a financial emergency. To that point, in order to get out of financial emergency, the city must first establish that it is operating an effective and financial accounting and reporting system. That is the point I believe we are today. Otherwise, the city has to prove that it has resolved the conditions outlined in the statute. In other words, the condition that put them in financial emergency, they have to resolve it. At this point in time, it appears that it has resolved it. And then the final one is there are no other conditions of financial emergency that currently exist. It doesn't appear that any currently exist, but it's difficult to understand whether that's going to be true or not until all the audits are completed and caught up and the auditor finishes their operational report. But at this time, it does not appear to be true. It appears that the only issue we have left is running and operating an effective financial and accounting and reporting system. The pros, the city has dramatic improvement in the last 2 years. 4 annual financial reports completed, completion of various audits, which have allowed the city to recoup overpayments, such as its CITT audit. There's belief that there may have been an overpayment to Durham. I believe in total that this exceeds $1.1 million, possibly up to 1.5. We've noticed an increase in new businesses to the city. You kind of get the idea that the city is becoming a hub for basically businesses that will feed Amazon or similarly related, trucking, shipping, warehousing. Negotiations with the City National Bank of Florida resulted in a release of funds to the city. They were necessary. The bank seems to be interested in the city's finances currently, are happier with the transparency of the information they're receiving. I believe they're going to conduct a new analysis of the city's finances to determine whether it can release additional funds as pursuant to their contract and as permitted on a yearly basis. With any hope, they will once again release the excess funds as they retain those that are necessary to pay the bond. And overall, we're dealing with an increased transparency. Cons, the city's financial books have not been fully reconciled, which brings into question exactly where they are. While there are strong other indications as to the city's current financial position, it would be nice to have a couple updated annual financial reports to be more certain. But at this point in time, there's no dramatic fear that the city's off course from where we are projecting. The city's financial department is underdeveloped. The city is having difficulty finding a finance director. The current vendor that the city is using, Tri-Merge, while it's operating and has influence, or in some places, the Tri-Merge is acting as the finance director. That contract doesn't really go far enough. It's kind of a mix. We have some city employees. We have Tri-Merge who's assisting. I just don't think we have a clear vision, and it's just kind of muddled. I believe the city manager has a vision, and I think a determination needs to finally be made on one approach. This mixed approach is just not going far enough, and the city needs to invest additional funds. And it's just causing some incongruence, because as it will, when you can't have more than one boss. We just need one vision. See, the city is not operating an effective financial accounting system, but has hired Tri-Merge, who is assisted. At this point in time, Tri-Merge has brought in the ability to confirm where the city is and provide some support that's reliable. But in order to get out of financial emergency, we just need the proof. So there's a hope within the next year, the city will get completely caught up on its independent audits, and we will have hard numbers that will be evidence that will provide a position for the governor's designee to make a final determination as to whether the city is or is not still in financial emergency. But much of that will still rely upon whether the city can procedurally comply with its requirements of providing an effective and efficient accounting and finance department system that at any point in time, the city can say, this is how much money we have, this is how much money we're going to spend, these are our numbers, and you can rely upon them. See, specific facts. 2020, city manager paid advised the governor's designee that one, the city's finance department has not consistently reconciled its financial books and accounts. and the city's available revenue and expenditure statements were inaccurate since 2017. The most recent financial report we received, the independent AFR, we compared with the data we received in 2016 and 2017, and has confirmed that the numbers are off, but not more than 10%. We didn't do a specific analysis as to the extent that it diverged. There's no evidence of fraud. There's no evidence of specific abuse. It's just that the numbers we received in our monthly reports just aren't reliable because they're not 100% accurate. And we would like to get to that point. The fears within the finance department began prior to fiscal year 2015 and 16 and appear to continue through fiscal year 2018 and 19. So there's evidence that the city stopped reconciling its books as far back in 2019 for certain accounts, and that progress really wasn't made to rectify that until 2018 and 2019. That is about the time that Newell Daughtry was the city manager, Tri-Merge was hired, Tri-Merge discovered this issue, Daughtry instructed Tri-Merge to begin working on it, and then when the current city manager came in, it became a focus to reconcile the books and catch up. So in 2019, the city was reconciling every single transaction to prove its position for 2017 and 19. Last year it did 2018 and 2020. And then this year they're trying to bring them all up to speed. I believe at this point, we're probably dealing with a couple of months worth of transactions that have not been reconciled. And I'm hopeful that within the next 6 months, they will be completely caught up. The impact, the failure to reconcile the city's books accounts impact every account held by the city. Implication, evidence of significant administrative failure, limited cooperation with the governor's designee and the FEB. Positives, there's no evidence of fraud or theft stemming from the non-reconciliation. The city has discovered other instances of fraud. They have reported to law enforcement. There have been a couple of arrests in other departments, but it's not necessarily tied to this issue. And it just appears that the city either got outside of its policies and procedures to reconcile the books, or the knowledge to do this information somehow fell through the cracks, but was not in and itself a scheme to defraud the city. In 2015, the city's finance department stopped taking steps to facilitate completing the city's annual financial reports. Since then, the city has completed everything except for the 2019-20, 2020-21 AFRs. At one time, we here estimated that they would finish the 19-20 by December. I still think that's the goal. I still think it's possible. I'm not quite sure the city will meet it, mainly because there are still impediments due to the size of the cities to handle. We still have the Auditor General down there. We are going to start getting the monthly reports. There are other pressures put on the city when they just don't have a very large finance department. But I am hopeful that by June of next year, they will have completed 19, 20, and 2021, which would bring them current and timely. Significance is fairly clear, but the main point is we will now have an updated and current understanding of the city's finances that's going to be reliable. This is Tri-Merge's primary timeline. They were hired in 2017. Contractual duties were expanded under Daughtry in 18. They were expanded even further in 2019 by City Manager Pate. At this point in time, Tri-Merge is almost the finance director. They've been tasked with reviewing employees, conducting assessments of the employees. They're performing almost all factors of the city. And without them, I don't think the city would have the manpower to complete all the tasks that are required of them. This is just a brief synopsis of their duties, and they're considerable. I think they've almost completely rewritten the policies and controls for the city. once again, these are their duties. This is almost everything a finance department is required to do. And these are being conducted or managed or monitored by Tri-Merge. Costs. So Tri-Merge has billed and has been paid $1.4 million over its life cycle. It's an effective hourly wage of $100. But through this, the city's required specific expertise. I've got a report here that indicates that at any point in time, the city has access to 4 or 5 CPAs, 9 or 10 accountants, 3 grant writers or grant support staff. This is a massive influx of manpower and expertise I don't think the city would otherwise been able to afford or even procure based on the limited availability within the area and the city's pay plan. But for analysis of just the impact of Tri-Merge on the budget, the city's payroll has got a certain expectation. With its inability to hire a finance director and other skilled employees, that role has been filled by Tri-Merge. So in effect, the impact of Tri-Merge on the budget has been fairly insignificant. In 2017-18, the city saved money. 2018 and 2019, despite all the ad by Tri-Merge, it only cost the city an extra $150K, and that continued. So despite the look on the vendor sheet that indicates the city has paid Tri-Merge $1.4 million, the increase over the budget has been less than $500,000. And most of that's because duplication of duties. The city already had a budget set. They already had employees they intended to hire. Those employees never materialized. Tri-Merge has filled the gap and has kept the city moving. Once again, 23 total consultants have worked on the project, or accountants, 7 CPAs, 5 grant experts. I actually even more than I remembered. Overall, our conclusion is Tri-Merge has been cost effective and reliable. HR data. So looking through this, we analyzed what's the impact on the city's ability to hire experts to work in their finance department. We compared it with their general ability to hire across all departments and came to a couple conclusions. But the main thing is, for an accountant position, it remained open for 130 days before it was filled, another one 190 days. Senior accountant's been open for over 470 days. At this point in time, it's closer to 500. Finance director is closer to 850 days. Those positions still have not been filled. That's further information about these positions. Now with these, the city has advertised, they've conducted interviews, but as you can see, for the accountant position, 94 applicants, only 26 were qualified. 16 of them were interviewed or agreed to appear for an interview, and they were only able to fill 1 position. So we compared these across all departments just to see how the HR department was working, to see what was the ability of the city to find these experts. And generally what we found is no statistical significance. There's no difference. The city's ability to advertise, hire, find interested parties, interview, and provide offers is the same across the finance department and all departments. So I can't find any data or any direct evidence, nor have we received a complaint that's reliable, that confirms any undue influence or impact on the city's ability to hire experts for its finance department. It just appears to me the city isn't able to attract it based on pay or mission. And it's understandable with the city being a financial emergency. But because of the inability to attract employees, it's beginning to appear that additional steps need to be taken. City cannot get out of financial emergency without rehabilitating its finance department, and its finance department is just kind of stagnant. So our conclusions are the city's just generally having difficulty hiring. It's definitely having difficulty hiring experts for its finance department, and this is hindering the city. Ultimately, the city will remain in a state of financial emergency until it can operate a modern finance department, one capable of operating an effective finance and accounting and reporting system. So the governor cannot end state action until the city meets this requirement. And our point of view is a modern finance department would have the spillover effect. It's more likely to complete its mandatory audits and financial reporting timely and accurately. The city's going to have quicker and more reliable finance transaction processes. We're going to have additional experts within the city that'll spill over into other departments as they can assist in either negotiating and analysis, contract writing, or even contract analysis. Ultimately, the foundation for most of this is we think that the city will be able to procure a new enterprise resource planning software that will either fix some of the issues we're currently seeing, make the city more efficient, and able to operate with a smaller employee set as compared to now, where a lot of the work being done is manpower intensive. They're having to reconcile books and every account for every year by hand, find transactions. There's not an automated way to conduct this, and this is taking massive amounts of time. So our recommendation is this: they need to outsource the finance department. I know outsourcing is probably not popular, but the city just cannot sit where it is any longer. It needs to make a final decision. There's pros, there's cons, but from our position, the city would, if it outsourced, would immediately have a significant access to expertise and manpower that it can acquire immediately, rather than the continued delay that's exceeding a year for some of these positions. Recommendation number 2, the city takes the finance director job and its assistant city manager job and combines them. It's an advanced position. We can increase pay. We can increase requirements. We can also divvy up duties to make things both easier for the city manager and easier on the finance director. It would require a restructuring, but it's a leadership restructuring, not a financial, not a manpower. But we can have an assistant city manager who's the finance director, which means they could cover human resources, IT, risk management. At the same time, we can have the city manager directly reporting to public works, police, code enforcement, parks and rec, water and sewer. Currently, the current city manager has an experience and a background in law enforcement. This kind of structure, we believe, might work. Once again, there are pros and cons. I'm not quite sure how long it would take to find and attract this individual. And it's generally a fear that the time could continue. Our expected results are increased efficiency, expertise, cost effectiveness, trust in the work of the city. And if the city outsourced, limited liability and risks, and just general the spillover effect of having increased expertise within the city that could be shipped to other departments. Our request is that the city consider that the FEB consider one of these 2 recommendations, either make one or both to the city. It is our belief that either one of these would help the city's progress, but outsourcing is most likely to have the quickest impact upon the city. The city could hire a vendor to work for 2 or 3 years and slowly transition in a different direction after it gets out of financial emergency. With significant investment in this, I think the city could completely rehabilitate its finance department in a year and a half. With that alone, will the city get out of financial emergency? No. Financial emergency at this point in time appears to be primarily procedural. Can the city produce reports that's reliable? In order to do that, it has to have a finance department that it can rely upon. And this is the recommendation of the governor's designee. Presentation number 2, kind of in a similar mode. What we've observed from here is that the legal services department budget varies dramatically. Legal services are difficult to budget, if not impossible. You can never really tell when you are or are not going to have a controversy, how big the controversy is going to be, how much legal services are going to cost, how much a settlement may cost. Because of this, it is our recommendation ultimately that a procedures change that will give the city greater access to information. It may increase costs, but we think this is going to be a very small increase as compared to the knowledge the city will acquire. The big thing is the city of Opa-locka has had a massive problem with this. Between 2016 and 2020, the difference between the city's initial budget and its final budget has varied by 61%, or on average $500,000 a year. This is not typical for any other department within the city. This isn't typical for any other city within the area or anywhere else in Florida. And it's mainly just because of the controversies that have occurred within the city. Sorry. Right. So overall, City of Opa-locka's legal services expenditure have been difficult to monitor and predict. The governor's designee generally sees relevant information well after issues have been developed. So in other words, we don't really understand the significance of the legal activities going on till we get a bill. Sometimes the bills don't reach the state for 30 to, in some cases, a year after they've been billed. A former city manager held on to bills for 2 years before they submitted to the city and then to the state for a review. By that time, most of these controversies are over, with no ability to assist, monitor, or even understand the problems that the city's facing. It creates a system that's just completely opaque, and nobody has sufficient information to make decisions. The FEB board has got no access to provide assistance or recommendations. And it's just a part of the city that just isn't clear and transparent to anybody. This is general estimation of the data we received. Total settlements are not massive. So it's not as if the city's got these cases that are massive controversies that are just built in the city. The litigation costs have been high, but not unreasonable. But the total administration costs are fairly high, but not unreasonable. The biggest problem has been budgeting for it. So 2016-17 was the truncated first year. Original budget was $233K. Final amount spent was $500. It's a difference of 112%. That's the variance. In 2017-18, the variance was only 1.5%. We did a good job budgeting that year. And then things changed. In 2018 and 2019, it was a regional budget of $450K. The state approved it. It seemed consistent with the experience. City spent $1 million on legal services. All of it seemed necessary. All of it seems reasonable, but it's a variance of 128%. The next year, the city raised the budget to 1.5 million. And that year, legal services only reached 600K. That means there's $900,000 that was over budget. That's a variance of 62%. So between 18 and 19, we've got two extremes where we've either got money that's not properly set aside to account for the city's expenditures, or we've got money set aside that's unnecessary. And considering how small the city is, these are huge variances. It's $600,000. And one year it's almost $1 million. These are funds that would, if better budgeted, would have greater access to controls. This year, it's another expensive legal bill, but not unreasonable. It's just a matter of finding a way to have a stronger projection. And our estimation is that the city will have a stronger projection with additional information. These are just the totals. This was the brief comparison we did. They're closer to 16%. So this is our takeaway. 2018-2019, underfunding the legal services division forced the city to cut funding in other departments more than halfway through the city so they could balance their budget and balance the department. The next year, the city overfunded it. So $1 million was set aside until near the end that could have been used for example, fixing Cairo Lane. This is just inefficient, but it's not at the city's fault. City's got a specific structure that allows it to have some flexibility in how it manages its financial vendors and its legal services department. Currently, the commission has delegated to the city manager the ability to review legal services bills and to approve them. City manager has the ability to sit in all commission meetings, including these shade meetings, to discuss litigation strategy and litigation issues. All of this seems to be compliant with their ordinances. I provided you with the code for review, but it seems to be all legitimate. There is some concern at the beginning, since the city attorney and the city manager are peers, that it's uncomfortable for the city manager to review the city attorney's litigation bills, but it's within the city commission's ability to delegate that. The city entered a resolution to allow the city manager to review all litigation bills and to approve and pay the bills. In review of the agreement of cooperation, this agreement doesn't violate the agreement. Our concern here is the budget. The budget is submitted to the state for review. The FEB board receives it. It is our opinion that we need more transparency here. We need to find a way to create a budget that's going to be reliable through the entire year. A variance of 168% is just one that makes things difficult for everybody to handle or monitor. It becomes more difficult considering this schedule. At the end of the year, the city has to prepare its final budget. The city cannot make a change to its budget after November 29th, which means by as early as September 30th, when the fiscal year ends, the city's got to start reconciling its books, making sure all its accounts are brought up to speed, it knows where its budget is, and then can make changes. Without additional information, if we're reaching this 60-day window to make changes and variances to its budget, it doesn't give us a lot of room and can create the effect where the city can go over budget. The city currently has at least one large case in controversy where the litigation and legal bills could exceed $1 million for the next year. That is a significant impact to the budget, a significant impact to its enterprise fund, and is going to be difficult for the city to manage just based on the number, but further without additional information. once again, reviewing their code, their current procedures follow their code. But also, in reviewing their code, the one that's going to be recommended by the governor's designee also fall within their code. So the city attorney handles certain cases, and then we have third-party vendors that handle others. The terms established with the city attorney are in their contract. We have litigation budgets, we have invoices, invoice auditing, we have cost containment, and then we have the new resolution. But some of these issues don't appear in the contracts the city signs with its third-party vendors. The city has been signing the contracts that are brought forward by the vendors. The city doesn't have its own contract. It doesn't have its own structural contract or preferred terms that allow it to have cost controls. These are the internal policies for how these bills are invoiced, reviewed, and approved. Once again, they're all compliant with ordinances and the resolutions of the city. They all work, but there's just a limited amount of information, and there's a limited amount of information that comes to the state. We're not included in the SHAE meetings, and we don't get reports on them. And that's fine. That's actually probably required due to attorney-client privilege. So it's even more difficult position because our ability to provide technical assistance is further limited for necessity. The third-party law firms, have limited reporting structures, limited cost containment mechanisms that we feel that can be changed. We feel that they can be changed because there are changes that exist out currently in public practice, especially those that are instituted by insurance companies. And then within the state, risk management alone has got a policy and procedure that we feel that the city should follow that would address most of these issues. One of the biggest things is the Auditor General addressed some of these issues as well in their findings. So legal services are unique, but ultimately it's it's in the same position as normal contract monitoring. You have a deliverable, you have a service, it requires reporting, it requires analysis, and it requires budgeting. And then we currently feel that the city doesn't have a advanced and sophisticated policy and procedure structure that will address this very complicated issue. This is an issue that's complicated for all forms of government because of Florida's public records law. Because of this, we recommend that the state share with the city its method and procedure, that the city review it and try to adopt it. So the Department of Risk Management has provided us with a copy of their contract and with their terms, their method for reviewing and analyzing legal bills and for maintaining control and budgeting, not only the instant litigation activity, but also costs for the entire state. So some of the biggest things that the state requires is more specific reporting requirements, specific budgeting requirements. There are auditing terms and billing requirements, invoicing requirements. There's cost containment, limited staffing and subcontracting terms. There are cons. The state uses a contract manager system of review. There's an employee dedicated to this. City currently does not have an extra employee to provide this service. The state's contract does not specifically address the procurement process. And with increased reporting will come increased costs. There is a trade-off. More information requires more pay. But I think in the end, the information that the city requires for where litigation is going, how much it's going to cost, how much the attorney working the case projects the cost to be, gives the city this information, the ability to digest it and make decisions, outweighs those costs. Furthermore, it provides the city with an earlier access to review the billing, auditing the billing, to ensure that it's receiving the services provided, that the billing complies with modern requirements for attorneys, and that it can properly manage it and project its costs. It'll increase the flow of information. It should increase its budgeting tools and auditing tools. It will increase institutional knowledge. For each report, we should expect of this is where the case is. This is the legal issues involved. This is where we think the case will going, how much it costs, and our settlement recommendations. It's massive amounts of information that should be included with this report that the budget director can analyze and make stronger projections. So it is our recommendation that the city adopt in some form the state's processes and procedures here. And the final report. All right. In October 2019, the city of Opa-locka terminated its city manager over the direct recommendations of JLAC and the governor's designee, and hired John Pate as the city manager after an executive search. On April 29, 2021, less than 18 months later, the mayor called for a special meeting of the commission with 3 days notice for the purpose of terminating city manager Pate. While the resolution failed, it is our opinion conflict remains. Many of these conflicts have been evident since 2016. Various commissioners have alleged that various city managers have failed to provide proper information, proper facts, proper figures. Various city managers have alleged that the various commissioners have micromanaged their administrations unilaterally of the commission. I'm not quite sure any of these complaints are unique to Opa-locka, and I think most of these are based on perceptions. But it is true, we're always going to have a situation where if there is a conflict for personalities or whatever, everybody's going to have their perspective. The other thing is true is this, is city managers have got to have some control to move the city forward, but the commission must have access to information. A great deal of it must be provided timely, and it must be reliable, which tails back to our first recommendation. Governor's designee has received informal reports of inefficient lines of communication between the commission and the administration, and it is our recommendation that the city take steps to fix this line of communication, and we have specific recommendations. Just kind of a brief background. City manager, form of government's been around for a long time. Form of government results was the result of reformers looking for a response to corruption by decentralizing the decision-making process. We are not dealing with corruption here, but we are dealing with the problem of a decentralized decision-making process. We need a more efficient means for the city commission and for a city manager office to communicate. And this is not a unique situation. Almost everybody in Florida has this issue and has this form of government. You know, in my mind, it's modeled after corporate governance. Voters function as stockholders, commission functions as board of directors, city manager is the CEO. Separate political pressures form the administration of the local government. Once again, none of these things are unique. Charter is similar to the Articles of Incorporation. The charter defines the powers and the duties of everybody who works within the city. Most specifically, the city manager, who's the CEO, the commission, who are the board of directors. And that's an example of where their duties go. And the charter may be amended. It may establish additional policies related to the roles of the board of directors, commission, and the city manager. It may establish rules governing interactions between them. The charter can be changed however it needs to be changed by ordinance or resolution as necessary to control the interactions between the two. I think it's without doubt the power rests with the commission, the authority to act upon the will of the people. They appoint the city manager, city attorney, and the clerk. However, responsibilities are separate. Commission has responsibilities distinct from the city manager's responsibilities. Responsibilities for appropriation of funds and balancing the budget are established by statute. Responsibilities for various fiscal, fiduciary, legislative, and oversight activities are established by the Code of Ordinances. Responsibilities for conducting all decision-making activities in the public are established by statute. Section 2.5 lists the specific powers established for the city commission. They're fairly standard. Here are the prohibitions. They are fairly standard. City manager's responsibilities for Opa-locka are fairly similar to the city manager's administrative role in other similarly situated cities. Nothing new or unique here. Section 3.1 are the specific requirements in Opa-locka. Fairly standard. Here are the powers and duties. Once again, fairly standard. So what we have is the ICMA recommendations. They have their tenets and their recommendations. So tenet 3 is demonstrate by word and action the highest standard of ethical conduct and integrity in all public, professional relationships in order that the members may merit the trust and respect of elected and appointed officials, employees, and the public. It's fairly standard. Our point of view is, in the normal circumstances, communication is never perfect. And oftentimes we will have disagreements that will muddle the situation. This tenet in the guideline is basically establishing that despite these conflicts that may arise, it's the recommendation that everybody take a similar professional code in order to work through them. But what that requires some type of structure. Tenet 3 also has guidelines. Length of service. Recommends at least a 2-year service as necessary to maintain some type of continuity. Continuity in the city manager's office for the city of Opa-locka since the financial emergency board came in has been non-existent. There have been 7 changes since 2016. Tenet 5, administration should submit policy proposals to elected officials. Administration should provide elected officials with the facts and technical and professional advice about policy options. Administration should collaborate with them in setting goals for the community and organization. Every decision in the modern world requires massive amounts of information. The modern world has the ability to create and retain massive amounts of information. The city needs a structure by which that massive amount of information can be provided to this commission so it can make its decisions. We've received complaints that the city commission is not receiving this information. I believe most of this is probably structural and procedural. I don't see any intent to hide information from the commission, but there is just such a massive amount of information. And with the finance department that needs a massive restructuring, there is a specific personnel problem of getting some of this information out. I don't find any fault here. There's no evidence of fault, but this is just the position of the city that it has fallen in, and then the city's working its way through. But we're in agreement. There's massive amounts of information that need to be shared. Tenet 10, resist any encroachment on professional responsibilities, believing the administration should be free to carry out official policies without interference and handle each problem without discrimination on the basis of principles and justice. So this is the tenet that a lot of people fall back onto. You're stepping on my toes. I'm being micromanaged. Does it exist? Possibly. Do I see any evidence of ill will? I do not. With the current commission, I see good people trying to do good work. They're cooperating with the state. But what we do see are just some communication issues that need to be addressed. What we do have is a situation where the commission should discuss expectations and performance measures with the manager, including the how, when, how, and what of the communication. Research issues of importance prior to meetings need to occur. Time needs to be provided, so this massive amount of information can be provided for making decisions. We believe the manager should set regular discussion times with the commission for issues and discussions and questions. We feel that's necessary and it's part of this form of government. What we have received is complaints that individual commission members have unilaterally directed the actions of the city employees. We have not received this complaint in a couple of years and not under the current commission. But in the past, we've had individual commissioner members have unilaterally directed the actions of the city manager. They've unilaterally negotiated contracts, instructed that the city use specific vendors. But one of the biggest things we've noticed is that individual commission members conduct meetings with the city manager that exceed 1/4 of the monthly standard working hours. Right. For this, we're going to discuss the point. Non-public meetings between the individual city commissioners and the city manager between this time was massive. 856 hours, 207 meetings, 230 meeting hours. There were 856 working hours. Of that, 230 were meeting hours with individual commissioners. Then there are the 20 meetings with the governor's designee that lasted 20 hours. It's a massive amount of time spent in meetings. That indicates the city manager is spending approximately 28% of the usual business meeting hours in meetings with the city commission. Our conclusion, the city manager is spending more than a week of standard work time conducting informal meetings with the commission. These are meetings outside the public eye. There are no requirements that it could be conducted in the public, but there's also no public documentation of it. The state has no ability to monitor, review, understand, or provide technical assistance in these meetings. And most of these meetings are for information gathering purposes, but it's a massive amount of time. If the city manager merely conducted 1 hourly meeting per week with each city commissioner, the city manager would have exponentially increased time to conduct his duties and responsibilities as established by the charter. The city has a process whereby the city commission may submit written questions to the city manager. That is already a procedure that exists. The city manager makes reports to the commission during every regular scheduled commission meeting. That is already a procedure that currently exists. There's already a structure for these things. Our recommendation at a micro level, the city should formalize line of communications between the commission and the administration. Establish a transparent chain of command and administrative responsibilities and protect established workflow. In other words, we think there should be a process by which the commission can ask for information, communicate in a way that complies with Florida's public records law, acquire this information in a timely and efficient manner. You know, the administration needs a process by which it can process commission requests for action through the manager. Modern world requires a lot of expertise. The city manager runs the city. He has division heads that have expertise. We have a police chief, we have a city engineer. There are specific questions that need to be funneled through these individuals for their expertise and to provide opinions and knowledge. But this information should still be funneled through the city manager, but we need a process by which their expertise can be brought into meetings. An hour-long meeting with the city manager about a engineering problem is not as fruitful without the city engineer there. But that's not always possible with the city's workload. So we need a policy, we need a procedure, we need a mechanism to make this more efficient. We think some type of standardization needs to be established. We believe there needs to be some type of tracking and reporting system. That way, one commissioner asks a question, information is compiled by the administration to respond. This information needs to be saved somewhere within the city and then shared with all the commissioners, either in a report during the commission meetings or informally outside of it. There's nothing that prevents the transmission of information. The city commissioner just can't use the city manager as a straw person to discuss policy. But they can all require the benefit of the expertise of the experts within the city to make decisions. So our recommendations using asynchronous meetings. Instead of meeting in person, most commission manager meetings should be presented through a formalized written process. Ensures compliance with the Sunshine Law, formalizes transmission of information, preserves information for public meetings, and allows responses to commission requests to benefit from an examination by all experts available. So it is our thought that a commission will have a question, it'll go to the city manager. City manager will have some time to ask the division heads, obtain information, draft a report, and then share it in response. That can then be shared at either commission meetings or informally to everybody, all the commission meeting members individually in preparation for a commission meeting. And it is our thought that a formalized method will boost efficiency and effectiveness, allow increased use of expert opinions in responses to the commission, preserve information, formalize knowledge, improve collaboration, at least within the city, and then increase the density of information provided to the commission. A lot of times, commissioners have suggested that they're not getting the full truth. Most of that has to do with the density of information. And it's hard to provide dense information in a quick 1 hour meeting every Tuesday, or even a 4 or 5 hour meeting every Friday, because information is so specialized these days. You cannot expect the city manager who's not an engineer or a CPA to be able to speak as in depth on issues as currently are being asked by this commission as necessary for the current struggles the city is facing. In the city commission, in the governor's designee meeting with the city manager, our meetings are never one-on-one with the manager. The manager always has the opportunity to bring in one of his division heads who can provide specific information. We feel this is more effective. And to be honest, I would love a system where even our meetings took less of the city manager's time. There's a limited quantity of it. And I'm frankly a little embarrassed to find out that the city manager is spending almost 30% of his day in meetings rather than running the city. That is our recommendation. Ultimately, it is our belief that everybody will benefit if, by a process by which questions can be written to the city manager. City manager will be given time to review, resolve, and provide it. The city commission has the right and the power to establish these rules. They can limit themselves, they can expand their access. It is our recommendation that the city commission take steps to limit in-person meetings for a more formalized method with denser information. If the city commission wants in-person meetings, we believe that they should self-impose rules to limit the amount of time. And we think this will benefit the city greatly. That is the governor's designee's recommendation.
Thank you, Brian. That was amazing and great presentations. I have to tell you, based on those three presentations, I feel like we as a financial emergency board are really well prepared to have a fruitful discussion. There was so much good data, obvious the work that you and staff at the state level have put into these presentations. Truly, this, I think, is one of those major positives that you spoke of at the beginning. Like, we couldn't have had this presentation, several years ago. We are now in a position to actually, make a fruitful recommendations and technical assistance process, as the city starts to see the end of the tunnel and actually light emerging out of a financial emergency. So we'll have plenty of time on the agenda to kind of discuss those recommendations and then take action later. But I want to transition now into the next item on our agenda, the report from the city manager. A few presentations here, and we'll obviously continue the discussion as brought up with the governor's designee report. But we'll be able to hand it over to the city and kind of hear a little more detail about the current state. And then we'll move on to our guidance and any recommendations we may have after that. So I'd like to recognize the city manager.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Slides, please. Next slide. Next slide. Table of contents. We're going to just, it's a pretty lengthy presentation, but I'm going to try to truncate it a little bit. Next slide. So upon becoming the city manager in October 2019, became city manager during a very pivotal time for the city in regards to the city being in financial emergency, in that the city did not make any significant progress at the onset of my becoming city manager, as well as working between two commissions. Last year, we received one vice mayor and a new commissioner, and 3 elected officials that carried from the previous administration. So there was a lot of changes and a lot of learning curve that myself and my staff had to go through, as well as being in the middle of a pandemic. And saying that, it's been my great pleasure and opportunity to lead the city as its chief administrative officer during the time period. It's been approximately a year since we had an financial emergency board meeting. So I do take these opportunities greatly when I have the opportunity to meet with the financial emergency board, along with the members of the governor's designee and members of the public, in regards to going over the city's financial status. Next slide. The current city elected structure: Mayor Matthew Pygott, Mayor, Vice Mayor Veronica Williams, Commissioner Alvin Burke, Commissioner Chris Davis, and Commissioner John H. Taylor Jr. Is the current city commission. Last year, we had Commissioner Shirlene Bass and Commissioner, one of our other commissioners, and during the transition. Next slide. History of the city, as everybody knows, the city was incorporated in 1926, of Moorish architecture, 4.5 square miles inclusive of Opa-locka Airport. We have approximately 2,806 businesses, 5,916 residents. Population is about 15,887. Demographics, so 40% Hispanic, white, and other, and 60% Black other. And that has changed since the last census, so that's not exact numbers. Poverty data: the median household income is about $21,523 as of 2019. Next slide. Upon coming into Opa-locka, it's been always my vision to assess the inefficiencies and efficiencies within all departments, to work with a team to recommend and implement a solid plan of action through budgetary processes as I work alongside the city commission, the city clerk, city attorney, my directors, the Financial Emergency Board, JLAC, and the governor's designee, the Chief Inspector General's Office of Melinda Miguel. I share with you, I have performed my assessment of departments, have made swift changes where needed throughout police, code enforcement, parks and recreation, building and licensing, and community development departments through strategic restructuring, as well as leadership changes, staffing assessments, operational enhancements, and improvements. And as well as looking at a health pandemic that affected and halted operations in the city, not just in the city, but in the world. But through my team's quick response and positive reactions to the pandemic, we were able to source new streams of revenue through the CARES Act funding to implement new programs to benefit our community. Some of the things that benefited our community was a housing and food security program that consisted of $2.1 million, along with operational cost reimbursements, funding for remote work, technology, public safety, and other operational needs of more than $1.9 million. We worked together alongside the City Commission to provide COVID-19 updates, provide public safety through our police force, a testing site for COVID-19, vaccination sites, and various other outreach methods. Through continued developments under my leadership, we have included assessments of the Finance and Human Resources Department, which as it will entail some organizational changes and operational enhancements. We are not completely out of the woods, but we with the successful completion of 2 past due audits, both FY 2019 and FY 2020 under my leadership, and a total of 5 audits completed by the city since fiscal year 2018, the passing of the 5-year recovery plan, and timely submissions of the annual budget, I'm confident about my abilities to work the plan for the future of the city and ensure that this plan is enacted with imagination and with wisdom through all parties involved. And that is through collaboration with the City Commission and my department heads, as well as the City Clerk's Office and the City Attorney's Office to move the city forward in a positive direction. I do not do this job alone. I would not be successful without my department heads, without my other charter members, without my the various residents that express their concern and various stakeholders that provide their guidance and input, such as the FEB board today. So in saying that this could not have been accomplished alone, this is not something that I would have been able to be accomplished by myself. And for that, I am very grateful for everybody that has been involved in over the last 18 months in moving the city forward in a positive direction. Next slide. So let's talk about some state and local agreement updates. 5-year recovery plan that requirement was met in August of 2020. Approval of the city budget on a timely basis before August 1st of each year transmitted to the state, as well as proper budget approval by September 30th. Since I've been here, that has been accomplished. Components of the financial recovery plan annual budget. The financial recovery plan annual budget being submitted for FY 2022 contains the level of detail necessary for the governor to analyze the underlying assumptions contacted in all estimates of expected revenues and expected expenditures, and takes in consideration the guidelines outlined within the interlocal agreement. We look forward to the necessary review, and we work with our city commission, our management team in the state to make the necessary adjustments or revisions of estimates expected in our revenues as well as expenditures. As far as incurring debt, the city has cooperated with all borrowing requirements. Next slide. Reporting to the governor, the city is in compliance with submitting its monthly revenue and expenditure report that compares actual revenues and expenditures in each fund with projected revenues and expenditures contained in the annual budget and budget amendments for FY 2020 and 2021 for the periods of October 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021, which is the most current as of the date of this presentation. And the goal was this report to be completed by the end of July, which the report was published and sent out today to the City Commission as promised by our Finance Department. And I want to thank Jerry Lazar of Tri-Merge as well as the Opa-locka Team Finance for getting this report together and fulfilling their promise to our elected officials and our public in regards to transparency in our finances. Financial integrity ordinance, the city is in compliance with that as far as in section 2-651. Financial and contractual obligations, the city is in compliance. And then failure to comply, the city is in compliance. So as far as the state and local agreement, the city has been in full compliance of the state and local agreement. I would like to say if there was any lack of compliance of the city not abiding by the state and local agreement, I think that information would have been transmitted to the City Commission through the governor's designee as appropriately delineated within the interlocal agreement. So in saying that, this office has always been an open and clear communication with the governor's designee and through the governor's designee, the Financial Emergency Board, in regards to city status, in regards to the implementation and following the interlocal agreement. Next slide. Independent review by the governor. The city is in compliance. The city's manager's office has provided open and two-way communication with the governor's designee to conduct audits, examinations, and studies of city deemed necessary to resolve the financial emergency. Governor's designee. The city is in compliance. In addition, the city's manager's office holds weekly calls with the Office of Chief Inspector General, who serves as the governor's designee, who has delegated authority through the governor to implement the terms and conditions of this agreement to maintain active and current communication on progress, performance, and assistance. Duration of agreement. We understand this agreement will remain in effect until such times the governor concludes that the state of financial emergency no longer exists pursuant to section 218.504 of Florida statute. The city is working in concert with the governor's designee, the Joint Legislative Auditing Committee, and the Auditor General's office to make improvements to assist the city with existing the state of financial emergency through oversight, ongoing communication and monitoring, and a strategic plan that includes both financial and operational changes to aid the city in functioning independently. Next slide. Amendments and modifications. There have been no amendments or modifications to the interlocal agreement. And notices and communications. All notices and other form of communication related to this agreement have been received. Next slide. Auditor General 99 findings update. With the findings, 84 findings in regards to the city, 15 CRA, total of 99. In March 2021, the city started working in conjunction with the Auditor General to conduct their 18-month follow-up on the city and CRA's follow-up on the 99 findings identified in the released Operation Audit Report, number 2019-221. An interest conference meeting was conducted on March 9th, 2021, with Ms. Jacqueline Bell as a supervisor and audit team leader, Mr. Javier Alfonso. Our staff has been working in conjunction with Mr. Alfonso and his team while they work remotely at the start of the follow-up and now on site since June 1st, 2021 to conduct their follow-up as outlined in the engagement letter dated March 8th of 2021. Next slide. Financial management, where are we now? So as far as financial management goes, there's management of day-to-day operations in regards to financial management, month-end and year-end posting of transactions, releasing of $5.2 million from City Financial Bank, FY 2019-2020 project plan for audit, utility billing transfer to Miami-Dade County, recruitment, finance director, senior accountants, open, request for proposal for financial operations, open, recruitment of a budget administrator, hired, CARES Act and American Rescue Act funding to be determined. And we're currently waiting for funding being transmitted from the United States government through the state to the individual cities. And upon that, those funds will be appropriately strategically earmarked for infrastructure and other programs based on the city commission as well as the city manager's office recommendations. So financial audits and compliance, okay? FY 2014 to FY 2019 financial audits have been submitted. Annual budget FY 2021 to FY 2022 approved by resolution to submit to the state for the review. CIT audit, discretionary surtax funds, as far from 2015 to 2017 completed with more than 901,000 received. CIT audit, discretionary surtax fund 2018 completed with more than 260,000 received. Next slide. Financial matters and impact. So as this slide kind of tells us, it shows where our state tax revenues are and based on type of revenues coming in. And during FY 2021, the city's received about $2.3 million in state funding. State revolving loan fund, access to new debt needed for future projects, as well as in FY 2021, the city's paid approximately $4,478,000 in principal payments, debt management and compliance with the 2011 A and B bond, 2015 A and B bond, state revolving loan payments. Approximately $2.5 million from release of funds from City National Bank was used to assist with paying down the 2015 bond debt. Red light camera, state of Florida debt, approximately $808,000 have been paid during FY 2021. Miami-Dade County old debt of $5.57 million, approximately $2.1 million has been paid timely with 24 monthly payments since July of 2019. Miami-Dade County new debt associated with $2.2 million related to the purchase and installation of water meters in the process of being discussed with Miami-Dade County. Renegotiation of a PBA contract with our police department, renegotiation of the ASME contract, and a class action lawsuit. Next slide. So to finance the 2019 to 2020 audit plan and timeline, the city is reviewing financial matters and operations of the city to include an annual budget, approval to implement by October 1st in accordance with trim rules, pending request for proposal for annual auditing services, continued recruitment efforts, and outcome of an open RFP for financial management oversight of the finance department. To produce a detailed timeline of the completion of the FY 2019-2020 AFR, it is the goal of the city to complete both the FY 2019-2020 and FY 2020-2021 AFRs by June 30th for 2022. Next slide. So at this point, I open the floor to any questions from anybody on the Financial Emergency Board based on information provided. And I thank everyone in advance for your input and discussion in the future portion of the meeting. As the city manager, I always look forward to the guidance from the Financial Emergency Board as well as the governor's designee office in regards to moving the city forward in a positive, efficient, and effective basis in order to make sure there's proper governance for all stakeholders of the city of Opa-locka. Because at the end of the day, the residents matter. And one thing I could tell you about Opa-locka residents are very prideful and they're very proud. And that has kept me motivated and moving every day of the week, even during tough times. So in saying that, I take any questions or answers.
Thank you so much. Love to open that up to the members of the Financial Emergency Board if you have any specific questions related to the presentation we just heard. It was a very good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Please.
Yes, I was wondering, you had mentioned the CARES Act and American rescue plan funding that you had some infrastructure improvements planned with that funding. Would you be able to share any of those improvements specifically with us?
Yeah, so currently we have a stormwater master plan as well as an infrastructure plan that the city actually just got a presentation on this past Wednesday. And from there, that funding is going to be my recommendation that that funding goes towards infrastructure improvements throughout the city as far as the city's flooding emergency and flooding condition. We don't have specific projects that the funds have been earmarked at this time, but it'd be my recommendation that those funds be utilized to resolve the city's state of flooding emergency that was declared some time ago.
Thank you.
I have a question relating to the water collection process. How's that going for the water bills?
So as far as the water collection process has always been a challenge for the city. And we are dealing with ongoing challenges as far as that is concerned due to current litigation that the city has in regards to water billing currently. But as we kind of approach that gamut and kind of deal with those matters head on, we see some opening in the promise to potential collection. At this point, it's very difficult to collect on water billing because of just of COVID-19 and the nature of the collection efforts pretty much being discontinued countywide as far as water cutoffs and various other methodologies that the city would typically take to collect water funds, such as filing liens on properties and various different things like that. So the city does not have those options at its disposal at the current time due to our current water billing litigation. But as soon as we see promise in the out there, we are going to start looking at a water collection plan in regards to providing a structured methodology to provide some type of light in the end of the tunnel for our residents and those that participate in water billing on behalf of the city of Opa-locka.
Thank you.
That's an important issue. I appreciate the update on that. I know there's been some historical reference there as well.
Mr. Chair, this is Frank.
Sir.
I've got a few questions that I want to ask of the manager.
Please.
First, I'd like to say I'm very encouraged with the progress that's being made, and I know it's a long haul and it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and it's good to see the progress that's coming forward. The first thing I'd like to know is what's the update on the Cairo Lane project?
Excellent. So as far as Cairo Lane is concerned, the project is on scope to be completed next year. But what we have done for the businesses at Cairo Lane as of recent, a couple of weeks ago, is we're in the process of milling and resurfacing the entire roadway of Cairo Lane in order to make the roads passable and usable by the businesses of Cairo Lane. And I think that has been an issue of debate for some time. And I thought the city should invest in that infrastructure, at least for a temporary fix, so the businesses are able to operate on a day-to-day basis so they can conduct businesses, as well as, those businesses have requested a reduction of their tax proceeds based on assessment appeals that have been filed. So the city wanted to take the steps to ensure that we at least attempt to improve the roadway to a point where those businesses are able to conduct businesses in order to combat those reductions to tax revenue potentially coming in from that area. And then as far as the project itself, we do have a projection completion of summer of FY 22, if that is to be exact.
So you're saying that the paving's been done. Where are we on the stormwater structure portions of that and the moving of the Florida Power and Light poles that had to be moved? So, I mean, do you have that detail? I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just trying to get
No.
on
So
where
the
that
FP,
is.
Yeah, no problem. FPL poles have been relocated. So the easement has been given to the city by FPL. So that was accomplished last year. And then as far as the assessment of the roadway, the state requested us to have an engineer come out and do another assessment of the roadway and give another cost, more detailed engineering schematics for more open cost estimate, since the project hasn't went on for so long and due to inflationary costs that are occurred. So we're in the process of getting the roadway reevaluated by engineering, the engineer plans done, and then actually putting the project out to bid with state revolving loan funds to be used for that project to be completed.
Okay, great. All right, just a couple observations. I want to, the board, we can't talk to each other, so we haven't had any communication for quite some time. So I want to make the board aware of some issues or observations I have in the dealings that I deal with the city on a monthly basis with the invoicing and so forth. I'm still seeing a large number of requisitions versus purchase orders. So I'm paying off for recs. Some of them now come to me with a PO, but we had talked some time back that that requisition process was going to stop and that I would actually be seeing a purchase order that had been issued that I was approving invoices against. So I get a few POs, but generally speaking, I'm still paying off for requisitions. The requisitions are stamped to prove that the goods have been received. I don't have any doubt with that, but I'm curious as to why we're not at the point that that I'm getting purchase orders with an invoice attached. It's what we had talked about over a year ago. We were going to transition to that. So that's one issue. Another issue is that occasionally, not as much as before, but I do get requisitions or invoices for huge amounts. Recently, I had one for $53,000 with no commission action, no agreement, no contract, no bid document, no nothing. I just get a requisition for $53,000, an invoice, and somebody stamped to pay for the services. So I reject those when I see them, and the other ones that are not sufficiently right, and I send them back, and then they either show up the next time corrected or I don't see them again. So I just want to make everybody aware that that process is still going on, and make the manager aware, if it has not hit his desk, that that's happening. Not as much as it did. It's certainly a big improvement, but it does happen. I just, I don't know if somebody thinks nobody's looking at this stuff or it's just going to pass it through, but I'm sure the board that we scrutinize every invoice that comes across my desk. Another thing that was kind of odd to me in going through the last audit that was presented is that generally in an audit, there's a letter from the attorney, the city attorney, that lists the exposures that the city is facing and what the potential, it's a confidential memo that is provided to the elected officials for them to be aware of what their outstanding liabilities are, or at least are on the, what they're facing. And that was not in the audit. And I don't know if that letter was provided to the commission separately, how the Opa-locka is handling that. But certainly the board should be provided that letter so that they can see those issues, because what we see in the audit is not the complete picture of what the liabilities are or the potential liabilities are of the city. And the other question I have is, did you hire a police chief? Have we got a police chief now?
Yes, we have a police chief.
That's great. Okay. I mean, we just, if I don't pick it up in the newspaper or something, we're not really up to speed with that. So that's great. And let me see if I got anything else. When we talk about the 5-year plan and what you present to the board, being that I was with the city of Miami. We were under oversight some time back. And the board stayed in place until the completion of that 5-year plan. So I'm just pointing out that, or asking, aside from the financial side of what's in the 5-year plan, there are operational objectives and goals and that type of thing. What's the reporting? What's the idea of the reporting on that, so the board can see in conjunction with the plan how, I realize the financial side is very important, but there are objectives that we're trying to accomplish during this 5-year plan. Is there a quarterly report or some type of report that goes to the state that we can see on the board as to where we are? And no, so I look at the budget. I can look at the 5-year plan. I can see what the projected budget is supposed to be. And then I can look back and see, is the budget in line with what the 5-year plan is? Are we under or over? But some of the other things is difficult to see if it's being accomplished or where we are. So, I mean, anybody can speak on that, Mr. Pate or Brian, or I'm just not exactly sure how we're monitoring the 5-year plan.
Brian, you want to take that or shall I?
From our perspective, the 5-year plan was just published last year. We
Right.
haven't gotten our first report on it.
You
So-
have not received a status report yet.
No,
I mean,
not yet.
it was like in August, right, when that was approved,
Correct.
20? So, I mean, we're coming up on a year. It would appear to me that we should be getting a status report of exactly where we are in conjunction with that plan, because if we're falling behind or we're getting ahead, whatever it is, I mean, those are the gauges that we've got to say, okay, it looks like we can turn this thing loose.
We're expecting to receive it probably in September this year.
Okay.
Between the Auditor General and trying to get out this budget and some of the reconciliation work, we realized it would be slightly off, but we're still probably expecting it in
Okay.
maybe late August or September.
All right, cool. All right. I think we're definitely making good headway. I'd sure would like to see a finance director. And I'm not really wild about combining the finance director with as an assistant city manager over their areas. It can lead to the potential of bad things happening when one person has a say over multiple areas. We saw that in the city. And it repeated itself again when they did the same thing. So to me, for the transparency and the checks and balances, to me, a finance and a budget guy shouldn't be together. And then you got procurement together with that. And then because of, individuals can start having control, that the checks and balances go away. It's just that simple. And with the problems that Opa-locka has had in the past, I would hate to establish a format of operations that could lead them into that again once we go away. And hopefully our objective, at least mine is to go away. And so this is not looking to be a long-term career and for any of us. And I think having that type of a system set up, it gives us a better feeling of just a better, more comfortable feeling that, hey, they got this, they got this, they got this. And when you start combining these things together, depending on the nature of the beast and the person that you put in there, you can start to run afoul again real quick, and it won't be caught for years. And that's what happens. So I just point that out to the board.
Frank, you were reading my mind. I think we've actually had a natural transition right into the next agenda space, which is sort of our larger discussion in relation to what we got presented from the governor's designee, and then also the city itself. So I'd like to continue the discussion you just brought up, because I think there were several items for consideration by the board brought up that we probably should talk a little more about, and kind of at the end of that, I think we can put together a consolidated action item for the board to vote on, for us to make some solid recommendations to the city. But kind of going in the order which was presented this morning, focusing on that finance side, I'd like to kind of have a little discussion, the city involved as well, but sort of the pros and cons and sort of the long-term vision of a continued outsourcing of that financial function. And I thought I saw on one of the city's presentation that is in fact kind of the logic that's going to go forward. Might want to verify that with the city manager, but it sure looked like they were in fact looking to continue outsourcing financial services for some period into the future. And I think that's a model that we may just want to sit down and discuss based on all of our past experience about where that could take the city, and if we feel solid with the recommendation that they should continue down that path. So maybe I'll start there. Mr. City Manager, am I understanding that right? Like, are you going to actually put out the that finance to bid, that function that Tri-Merge is doing now?
Mr. Chairman, yes, actually, the RFP is actually on the street currently to provide two options. One, the full outsourcing of the finance department by a third-party financial firm, and second, a hybrid option where a finance director would be hired from in the city with additional staffing coming from a third-party financial firm. I am a little bit sensitive to this topic because I come from an environment in Chicago where I'm accustomed with financial operations being 100% outsourced out by a third-party firm. So that is the experience that I have. I think with the challenges that the city has as far as financial controls, I think having a third-party firm provides additional level of fiduciary responsibility and ensures the city is not placed in a similar situation in the future. As you know, the city has been in financial emergency in multiple occasions historically. So I think whatever decision or recommendation we make, it has to be one that is going to move the city forward in a positive direction, so this condition does not occur again.
I totally agree, and obviously that's that procurement's active and on the street now, so we don't need to discuss too much more on that. But I am sensitive to this notion that Mr. Robinson just brought up as far as balancing out that equation. So obviously there's a lot of efficiencies we saw in the presentation this morning of having that specialized expertise available on contract, oftentimes a cost savings, but then balanced out with the potential consolidation of activities under that assistant city manager versus the internal controls between not only that contract firm but also internally. So I kind of open that up to the rest of the board. Frank, I think you bring up a really good point there as far as the limits of those efficiencies or what we should be recommending there. It sounds like we are fairly agreed, and the city is actually acting on one of those recommendations, which is to continue to think about the outsourcing function, which I agree with. But we may want to just pause for a second and discuss a little more this notion of consolidated positions or the structure that we might be able to recommend to the city to provide that balance.
Well, I'm glad to hear that they're moving in the direction that the manager spoke about regarding outsourcing, because I think that's important. And I think the report talked about reliable information. I think that's also important. And the best way to get it is to have people who know what they're doing it and doing it consistently. But I also think it gives the city a foundation for at least learning how important those functions are, and even recruiting people from those agencies to come to the city at some point in the future if the city wants to build its base. So I think that's a great idea. And then the other parts, I'm okay with most of that as well, because I do think structure matters. And having one person with too much authority is a problem. And finance with the management is not always good, especially when you control purchasing and other things too through your management hat. And you also are looking at the the money as well. So no, I think it needs to be, and there shouldn't be a consolidation. Maybe co-locating in the same, reporting structure, but definitely two different people, not one.
Yeah. So, I think what I'm hearing is obviously there's a couple of different options that are out there in this request for proposals, and sort of as you're procuring these outsourced financial services, I think the board would be inclined to make the observation, and certainly we would want to have feedback on this, that whatever one of those two options you choose to invoke and go forward with, we would obviously want to see a structural component to what sort of structure you need to make either one of those roads successful. So obviously, I think to JD's point, it may look structurally different under a completely outsourced financial model versus that hybrid model. And I don't really know that any of us can say, a priori, which one would be better or worse. But I do think that the board would be wise to sort of recommend that the city at least provide, when that contract is awarded and when you come up with the plan going forward with the finance operations, to ensure that you have the structural component of the internal control side matched up to either model. So Frank, does that get kind of what you were saying as well?
Yeah, I would support an outside firm handling this, but the caveat to that is that contracts come and they go, and the commissions change, and then they give direction to the manager that they want to go out again and get another firm for whatever the reasons are that they want to do. And it's sort of like having an auditor maybe for 2 or 3 years, and then it's time to make a change, just so there's another set of eyes taking a look at what somebody else has been doing for a period of time. And I would still encourage having a finance director that will, provide the continuity, because in the reality of how things happen, the most vulnerable of the group is always the manager when it comes to the commission. And then for the continuity of things to continue moving forward, you have those heads of departments, whether it be a police chief or a finance director or a budget director, that gives the commission the comfort level that they can make the change if they have to for the administration, and still have the continuity moving forward with the city. And so with keeping that in mind, to me, yeah, you can go outside and get a firm to handle the finances, but there needs to be somebody that's watching that house, and it is tied directly to the manager. So, that loyalty there to the city and to the manager, and not to the firm, there's a division there that somebody is overlooking that. And so if you turn it loose, and you could get a good one, and you could get one that starts doing some things that you're not aware of, because there's not somebody watching that hen house. And it's just not good to turn it all over. And then if you do make a change, who is the continuity link between the administration and a new firm that comes on board to, bring them up to speed with what your expectations are and how it's been running. So, I would still encourage them to pursue getting that. That's a very key position for a city, not to have a finance director and be tied to an outside agency completely. It's just not a good look.
Yeah, I agree. And I did want to I think all of us know this, but the main limitation in my mind, and one of the things that was rightfully put in the presentation, was, on the one hand, the benefit of a consolidation allows you to perhaps recruit at a higher level. And, recruiting in general, as we've witnessed by these positions, it's a tough sell these days. It's really hard to find good people, as always. Frank, I completely agree. Like, the ideal scenario would definitely be, a fully staffed finance director and a few staff to actually be able to manage that outsourced contract well. But there may be a growth between here and there. So, I'm aware from the city's perspective, it may be very difficult to actually try to fill that finance director position.
Understood.
But it probably would be a continued thing to focus on for
But
sure.
you kind of liken it to, if you look at the Cairo Lane project with a contractor running that and no public works director, and it just runs amok. And then they come back and they say, well, this happened, that happened, we got to do this, I need more money, whatever it is. And the same thing can happen in that financial side. And the auditing is so important when you have somebody from the outside, and that there's no tie between that auditing firm and that financial place. And you'll find when you go back with the lineage, you'll find a nexus there that they've worked together before or whatever. And they've got to be so careful of that, like they say, politics makes strange bedfellows. And none of these outfits are doing this out of the goodness of their heart. It's a business. And our business on the city side is the residents and public service. And it's not a profit motive thing. So the more you outsource, the more you have to oversee. And I'm sure what the manager is saying with the experience where he comes from is that you've got to be bird dogging all these outside outfits pretty regularly. And that requires staff and knowledgeable staff to be able to do that, to pick up on the nuances of something that might catch somebody's eye and say, whoa, wait a minute, I need to take a look into this a little further. So, but listen, I'm supportive of it, and then get the ball rolling.
Excellent. I know one of the other things that was brought up in the presentation this morning was sort of that standardized legal contract. I think I've seen and certainly had discussions over the years about some of the billing practices, and keenly aware of the disruptive pattern of not being able to forecast correctly, and then sort of the delays or impacts they may have throughout the fiscal year. But certainly want to take a moment and talk about that as well.
I'll make a comment on that, and being in the boat that the manager's in for a while. Well, these lawsuits that are that pop up require, to me, multiple shade meetings with the elected officials, so that they can get a good feel as to how these things are moving forward. Not just an invoice, but the attorney should be advising those policymakers of the potential of a win or a loss, or when do you cut your losses, or this has changed in this offer, or whatever is going on. And it's very difficult for the manager to talk to each of them individually, because you don't want to talk about these lawsuits in a public meeting. And so I think part of the issue with these, and I look at the ones with the water and with the solid waste, the trash pickup and all that, how often are they meeting with the commission and having these meetings and keeping them appraised of what is actually happening? Because as Brian is saying, we see these bills coming in, and it's a lot of money, a lot of hours that are going. And I'm just wondering if that's one of the issues that the elected officials are concerned about, that they're kind of, and I'm just talking, because we're not there and we don't know. But I know that from my experience is that when we had a lawsuit going, we definitely had shade meetings on a regular basis, so that attorney could update those elected officials of exactly what was going on with those suits. So that's to me a key thing in getting the confidence of those elected officials to allow the manager, and the attorneys to continue, or no. We say, hey, look, now we're at this point, and you lay that out for the commission, and the commission gives the direction and says, hey, settle it. We got this offer, settle it, cut it loose, do this, do that, change the policy if that's what their issue is, or we're gonna abate these bills and get rid of that. And so it's all a win-loss deal, and it's difficult for a manager to do it by himself and meet with the attorneys and then try to advise the commission, and then the commission has got questions, and then you don't answer that question, another commission's got another question. So to me, on these things, the shade meetings are extremely important to be on a regular basis, so they're up to speed. And, you know, that's my comment on the legal side.
Yeah, I think that was, as Special Counsel Hunter kind of indicated, I think that standardized model may be able to address some of that. And then, you know, your comments actually was sort of a twofer to that third issue about more standardized communication process. So I think that was actually a really good example of one of those spillover effects that Mr. Hunter spoke of. So I don't want to cut off the comments there. Anybody else have anything on the legal side as far as sort of?
Yeah, I agreed with how it was presented as far as standardization. I think it's very important, but at the same time, I noticed like Brian did about the variability between, you know, budgeting issues from year to year. And I was glad to hear him talk about the fact that it's not a lot of major serious issues. But I do notice that a lot of the legal issues may relate to employee issues too. So I think partly what is important is how the other issue as far as the communications matters. So I think it's definitely spilling over from one place to the other consistently. But when you have so much movement, I think in the management and the leadership and even in the politics, it just creates these issues from time to time when the politicians start to interfere with the administration, which I think is the next issue. So I think this definitely will help if it's standardized, and it will help with budgeting, and it will help with structure. So I think that's really important.
Well, I know we've kind of touched on it briefly, but I also just wanted to make a little time here to talk through that third issue of just structural communication patterns, or that was a great analysis of some of the time usage with allocation of meeting time. Obviously, there's a balance to be struck there, like everywhere else, but but perhaps we could benefit from recommending, you know, a slightly more formalized or communication process in that respect. So I know that's a sensitive subject, and a lot of that revolves around personalities, but you know, in my mind, it really comes back to sort of a caravan problem. We're all in this together, and we only move as fast as the slowest person. So, you know, it's kind of just a lot of continuous effort, but you know, very clear and concise communication always helps. I actually just read an article last night that I'm going to try to reincorporate into most of my email communication, but it was talking about the importance of the bottom line up front. So just sort of like, you know, a lot of times we've gotten used to just being, you know, verbose or flowery, but oftentimes it's nice just to say, hey, look, here's the bluff, here's the bottom line up front, and kind of be super clear, especially when we're trying to get on that same page. So certainly just wanted to open it up if Angela or Kim or anybody else has anything to say about the communication side.
Yeah, I think it would be beneficial if there was a way they could set standard meetings weekly so that it would limit the amount of the excess time that it's been taken away from the city manager's ability to manage the city.
Yeah, and again, the specifics of what that would look like is obviously dependent on, you know, what they need, and that's sort of morphed out. But I think just a rebaselining of the expectations may be appropriate.
I think in my experience in dealing with the elected officials is that they're all individuals. They're all different. Some of them need more attention than others do. Some of them are bottom line people. They look at numbers, they look at certain things, and then others need more explanation as to why, especially when you have people that are very short tenure and come in new to a position. They want to be very careful how they're voting on something, that they understand all the nuances and everything of what's going on. So I think it's important that they have a structured agenda review that available for the manager. I would do that with each one of the commissioners before a meeting to get them in a level of comfort. And some of them required every single item. We went through it details. Other ones would pick out 2 or 3 that they wanted issues on and were satisfied other than that. But certainly when you look at the hours that are happening with this manager and the elected officials, it's way out of whack. He doesn't have time to do his job. So that means late into the evenings and weekends because the job still has to be done. And then that boils down to the department directors having to be available for the manager. And then that means the staff has to be, when he gets down to specifics dealing with something, then the public works director's got to call somebody in on a project. And so it can all steamroll into not just a manager tying up his time, but those employees that should be spending more time with their particular areas are having to be available to assist the manager in these impromptu meetings or whatever. So if you can structure out time to where you have an hour with one a week, and so every day you meet with one and have something like that, and they pick a day and they come in with their items, and you got an hour, and lay it on me, and I, those things I can't address right now, I'll have it back for you. We'll get you answers back. And then it's just imperative that the manager does not drop the ball and comes back with those answers. You jot those things down, and because you won't find that most of the elected officials want to put a lot of the stuff in writing. They want to come and talk to you. They want to come and talk to their manager and say, hey, I got an issue with this or an issue with that. And all those things that you write down are public record. And then somebody requests all the documents that you had with this mayor. And now somebody's making a big deal out of something that was innocuous that you had a discussion over. So the elected officials have valid reasons for how they handle things too. And there just has to be a meeting of the minds so that the manager can do his job and not be tied up with them a huge amount of the time. It can't be. So, just my thoughts on it.
And Frank, all of us have had shades of those experiences. I know at the local level, this is sort of a classic issue. Like I wish we were the first ones to ever have to try to grapple with this. And I actually found it's even though most of us know a lot of that history about the form of government, it's actually a really good reminder that that a lot of this tension is sort of just hardwired into the structure and sort of just requires that level of showing up every day and just loving the process, like we talked about earlier. If you don't love that process, like it's probably not going to work out very well for you. Well, let me try to do this. I'm gonna try to articulate a consolidated sort of action item that we could kind of think about, and then we can call for a motion if that's appropriate, if we're all in agreement. But from what I'm hearing, a consolidated action item from the Financial Emergency Board might address all 3 of these topics. Certainly, we could recommend the continuation of that public procurement for outsourcing of the finance department, whether it's through pure consolidation or a hybrid model. Depending on which one of those go forward, we certainly think there are some structural components that may need to be aligned with whatever proposals come in and are accepted for the outsourcing of finance. We want to make sure that there's not only appropriate arm's length distance and internal controls, but also longevity and the ability to make sure that that contract is being managed well, balanced by the notion of being able to hire out and hire in the right level of person. So we certainly want to recommend that reprocured finance department, a balanced approach to staffing that contract, the adoption of that state legal contract language so we can make sure that we get enough information, and actually all of us, including the city manager's offices and the commissioners, get enough information about specifics to be able to, forecast not only that risk and what's coming down the road, but have the information for us to review as a financial emergency management board. And finally, just a consideration of where appropriate formal communication processes and how in fact best to utilize everyone's time so that what needs to be a private conversation is, and what is obviously public business and needs to be discussed openly, respective of not only staff and director, but manager and commissioner's time is considered as well. So I think a consolidated action item with those three categories in mind is what I'm proposing, and certainly want to hear a little discussion if comfortable, a motion there.
If I may, each one of those recommendations probably all combined equal 1 FTE. A funnel for communication between the commission and the administration, someone to manage contracts with the legal department, and I mean, maybe not with the finance department one, but I think at least 1 FTE is going to be needed. The contract the state uses has a contract manager, and there's some specialized skills that goes along with that, and that the state uses. I don't know if the city would require 1 full FTE just for that job, but it may be 0.4. It may be a 0.5. We don't have so much litigation, it would feel that much, but there's a lot of duties that go in there. Just auditing the bills alone is a specialized skill that is going to take some training. The communication between the commission and the administration, it may be a full FTE of its own. There are some FTEs currently in place, but they don't do quite these duties. But I think part of it may be a recommendation to either hire an employee to do a mix, or somehow an additional hire may be necessary.
I think you bring up a good point, but if we were to give this kind of direction, it would give the manager the ammunition to come with the next budget proposal to say, okay, I mean, the whole objective, and I think besides getting on financial sound footing for the city, is for us to go away, for not the, it's just not a good look for a city to be under oversight by the state. It just sends a bad message. No matter how well they're improving, they're under oversight. And so for them to start to develop the administrative staff to help us go away, the board is saying, hey, this is something that you ought to do. And it requires bodies. I mean, that's what public service is that's what we do. We provide bodies to do certain things. And for the city to get to that point of being cut loose, there's got to be some other structures put in besides just dealing with the financial side of the city. There's an operational side, just the manager dealing with the elected officials. How much time is the manager spending with the public? I mean, there's people from the street that want to come in and talk to the manager about their problems. So you add those into the equation. How much time has he got to be working with his departments and working on projects and giving direction and following up on the myriad of asks that have come from the elected officials because he's spending time with the elected officials? I was at a meeting of Comstat, which is I know J.D. Patterson's aware of that.
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
An outfit out of New York City with the police department. And I was at a meeting with them in New York City years ago. And there was a particular horrendous murder that had taken place. And they had all the officials there, and the commissioner and the police chief, and they're grilling everybody. And they finally get down to the sergeant that's in charge of the investigation. And they brought him up there and they said, what's happening? Why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? And he said, well, if you quit bringing me to these damn meetings, I could go out and get something done. And they kind of chuckled, and the police commissioner turned to the chief and said, I love this guy. And I look at the manager here, and he's got all these things to do, and he's spending his time in meetings. It just doesn't work. And another thing I'd recommend is that buy 5 copies of the 1 Minute Manager and give it to each one of the commissioners and let them read about how a manager has to do his time and get things done. And it's not magic. It's time and it's hard work. So I support the idea that the chair is coming up with, and then however it's implemented and finances would be between the manager and the elected officials in the budget.
Yeah, I would certainly expect that, based on these recommendations, there may very well be, that inclusion of whatever staffing resources it takes. And obviously we kind of do a little trial and error there, right? Like, okay, you may have underestimated the amount of reporting that we expect to see as a financial emergency management board or a governor's designee. So there may be a tweak, but we certainly would think that would impact the budget for the next fiscal year.
Yeah.
I agree, and we want something that's going to be sustainable. And I think having a person there fulfilling the role and working with the structure that's put in place will help. So I'm supportive of it.
Well, I could try to articulate that a little less wordy this next time, but I'm certainly open to a motion if we think that's the direction with that 3-pronged approach of finance supported by the right staffing, legal services supported by the right staffing, and also communication just internally and talking about rebaselining expectations there. So if we're all comfortable with that, I'd certainly be open to a motion that we could consider that recommendation.
I would so move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
This is Kim. I second it.
Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and take a vote on this consolidated motion. I think we've discussed it and ready to vote. So all those in favor, please indicate aye.
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 All right, let the record show that motion passes, and we'd like to make that recommendation formal and can continue discussions at our next meeting. I believe we'll get back on track to hearing more, not only expected report outs, but that great data we've seen, obviously a new budget coming up for consideration. And the good news is, as we've heard in this meeting, it's largely positive. This is really heading in the right direction. The fact that we can just kind of openly discuss a lot of these issues and there's essentially no drama based on anything other than just good managerial practices and really the will of all of us to get the great city of Opa-locka back on to an independent stretch. So moving on, the next item on the agenda is the Opa-locka City Commissioner comments. So I'll turn the reins over to the room there. I don't know who else is in the room, but the camera's focused on the manager, but certainly want to take some time for City Commissioner comments if there's any in attendance.
Yes, who do we have on Zoom?
Mr. Pygott, Mayor Pygott, how are you, sir?
I'm loving life. Is it possible for me to be seen on here? Can I be added so I can be seen? Well,
It may be on your end as a video control.
There may be a camera there that has a red line through it, and you can hit that down low on the bar. There you go.
There you are.
It is good to see everyone today. Being here, it's been a while. How you doing, Frank and Chairman Collins, Patterson, Hunter, Angela, all of those. Thank you so much. I don't see the name. I see Brian Hunter twice in terms of the name, so I apologize.
It's Kim. It's Kim. I'm piggybacking off of Brian's email.
Masquerading.
Got it. Just number one, much respect for being in this for the long haul. Both of us have been in this since the very beginning. 2016 was our first elected. I've been the only person really here at the elected official level that's been here since the beginning and had to feel the brunt of the financial oversight board when a lot of the commission budget was cut, the special events were cut. A lot of those things took place at the very beginning. So it is good to see the progress that we've been making as a city since that time. And this oversight board has been very instrumental in some of the most significant changes that have led us to this point. One with our solid waste contract that we had, that was a very challenging situation that had trash throughout our city, from our water billing and helping to negotiate that with Miami-Dade County to make sure that we can get a hold of our water bills, assisting in the recruitment of Tri-Merge back in 2017. And also my personal request that I made to the Chief Inspector General was to have those weekly meetings with management. Because one of the challenges that was stated in Mr. Hunter's report was the lack of information and reports that we were getting, especially when it comes to our finances. So when I made that request to have those weekly meetings, the Chief Inspector General obliged, and it's been going on ever since. So I'm happy to see that. And also, I cannot go and be remiss without the support that our Chairman Collins, I'm thinking about CRA board, did in terms of providing assistance in terms of our jobs program. So it's just so many things that we really appreciate that we've done. There's an all new leadership since back in 2016 in the commission, and it's been a big part of a lot of people throughout here down on the ground to make sure that we change that leadership that led to changes in the attorney, and also again the permanent city manager contract. So those are the things that we move for. But as Chairman said, I want to be straight to the point and to the bottom line and be very clear about some of the challenges that I'm seeing since being in 2016, and hope that this board can look to make investigations and maybe make some things that can really bring this to light. The first and foremost is our finance department. As Mr. Hunter said very clearly, we are still having very serious challenges, and it's almost the exact same challenges that we had at the very beginning. Making sure we have a competent, full, robust staff that are there, and making sure our banks are being reconciled on a timely process, getting these audits done. Within the last year, we only got one audit done. In the past, we used to get multiple audits done each year. So those things have slowed down. But the most significant, I think Mr. Hunter pointed out, is those inaccurate statements that we were experiencing. And it's very hard to do our job as a commission without those monthly budget to actuals reports, which this commission has never received until today. This is very significant. I haven't never sat on any board in which I haven't seen budget to actuals on a regular basis. And we need to make sure, and I'm hoping that continues, but I want to put some type of pressure, because I think I heard that it was the Inspector General that said we didn't need budget to actuals. Is that correct, Mr. Hunter?
I believe the statement was that the city failed to comply with its duties between 2016 and 2019, that it was the new city manager that had to come forward with candor to explain things to us that the commission should have provided. And so at that time, concerning the workload, it was decided that we didn't need the monthly reports until such time as the finance department could catch up and provide the information that we were required to have. So we made an allowance to allow the administration to process its information properly. That's when we started conducting the weekly meetings on our own decision, so we can maintain some type of knowledge and understanding. So yes, the governor's designee decided that it was time to delay some of the pressure being put on the city by the FEB so they could get work done.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'll add to that. I know even in my own operations, all of us, like there's no underestimating the importance of that budget to actual report. That's a fundamental piece of good management, 100%. But there is that balance. Like, I'm not so sure, in my role as in my professional role, what I would glean from monthly to actuals that weren't accurate. So it's sort of like there's a feeling there. You may want to take the pause and actually make sure the work is getting done, so that whatever version of the truth you're getting is and understood and actionable across the board. So want to make sure that doesn't change month to month to month.
And I would also add, City Manager Pate gave us direct access to the bank accounts. So at any point of our choosing, we could go in, look, verify numbers, deposits, expenditures. So we kind of start using that data in exchange. And then we relied on much of what we do on the faith and the candor of the city. So as statements are made, statements are proven, we've relied upon that. That information has become more reliable. So much of what has been allowed has been mainly to allow the administration to function timely. Under a lot of pressure, there's been a brain drain in the finance department with the inability to find a finance director, and then just between the audits, the operational audit from the attorney general, I'm the auditor general. And then we just spent a year through a COVID that made production difficult all over the place. I don't feel the level of work coming out of the administration to be inconsequential. I think they've done a very good job over the last year and a half.
Okay, I was just commenting because that was shocking to hear. I did not know that that was a director from the Inspector General to hold back on those reports. Those were things that we've been asking about, and that information wasn't relayed to us as a commission, and that was the reason why we weren't getting those reports. So as the governing body here on the ground, it's important for us to have that because it just makes it very difficult for us to understand. And we were getting those reports prior to this new administration and new manager. So those things are just, that was part of the uneasiness and really being concerned about if all of a sudden you stop getting those reports and you're not understanding why. That's very difficult to do a job at and manage to be over a commission during a time of financial oversight and not receive that. But it also goes into the part of the HR. As you've seen that we've been having challenges for a few years in terms of recruiting staff in various key positions and also in our finance department. And the commission has made multiple requests to get an understanding of what is going on in HR that is leading to that, because there has to be some type of evaluation of why this is happening. We are in a pandemic, but there are people that do want to work. Opa-locka does have its challenges, but what is going on there? And I would love for us to really get into and see, I don't know if somebody can just look into our HR and also our evaluation processes. The other thing that was recently brought up was our budget. This year we received a budget that's over $5.6 million over, and is going to utilize our fund balance. If you reviewed the last audit reports, it showed a negative general fund balance of 2.2 million. But we received within the past week and a half, we received information saying that we may have a surplus of 6 million. So to go from 2.2 in the last audit to a surplus of 6 million, and then to use 2.2 out of that, and just overall almost all line items, all the funds are going into deficits. It's really challenging. And when I align that budget with our terms of our agreement, there are a few about the debt tables, understanding, identifying what's our timeline for debts. So I would request that ideally if the board as a whole can also review that budget to make sure, because they're signing similar practices that was in the past. You have significant amount of funds going to commission events. You have a select salary increases. And also it doesn't seem to align with our 5-year recovery plan that was submitted last week. So if you can just take a look into that, I will be very, and I was happy to see Mr. Patterson speak about the water collections. We have, from last reports, received over $5 million outstanding collections in that. And the detailed game plan, this has been something we've been dealing with since the very beginning, and a detailed game plan to understand how we're going to go about that and to invest into that is something that is critical to getting out of this financial oversight and being clear with those funds. that capital improvement projects, Mr. Rawson, you hit it literally right on the head. Every single year we've been in this, and I've been here on the commission, we've said that next year Cairo Lane is going to get completed every single year. And it's just not happening. Not happening. When the manager first got on, we went up to the state, and it was requested that we have an outside project person on to govern that. I believe that person is in place, but we got to be clear about what that is, because our Cairo Lane development is stemming the flow of funds for all of our other infrastructure projects. And we are under a flooding emergency right now. We have a stormwater master plan that's looking to be completed within the next year. And we need to be able to release those funds to give the assistance to these businesses and our residents as soon as possible when it comes to these capital. These infrastructure has been delayed for decades. And it is one of our number one priorities to get those infrastructures done. And Cairo Lane is holding us back quite a bit. So much so that you will see junkyard fires on an annual basis here in the city. And it also goes into our buildings license and code enforcement. What is happening to where those things are continuing to exist in the city? And where's the investigation? We've asked for investigation and code enforcement. I would strongly encourage you to pull that report, that memo from the manager, and see if it was as exhaustive as the challenges you've seen we have in the past, because the challenges in building and licensing has costed us hundreds of thousands of dollars. So with our Durham moratorium, with these fines and things of that nature. So I would love to look into that. And two more things before I get into our last, is our police report. Last year, we requested the Miami-Dade PD to do an assessment of our police. And they came out with quite a few recommendations. And with this budget, we saw a 20% increase in our police department, and also increase in staff. And this is one of the highest levels of staff we had since this budget anticipated the highest level of staff since the beginning of this financial oversight. And specifically in the report, it says that we had, at the time of the report, an adequate level of staffing. And now there is 7 more additional people to be added there. And I didn't see the actual alignment between our budget and the recommendations to ensure the items that was identified in that report are being resolved. So I would love to be able to get a very clear understanding of, if y'all are telling us these are the issues, what is our game plan? And how are we allocating the funds to make sure that each of those items are going to be addressed? And that level of reporting has been a challenge. And this leads me to my last piece that was mentioned on Mr. Hunter's report about the city manager. And yes, we've gone through quite a bit of development in this city. And a lot of those developments have been in progress for many years, and this manager has made sure that those things are moving forward. But there are 2 things that was pretty open when Mr. Hunter put up that report about the role of the manager and the ICMA tenants, and also the fact that I called a special commission meeting to do 3 things. I had 3 items on that agenda. 1 was to terminate the manager, 2 was to do an investigation into the manager, and 3 was to amend the contract to extend his evaluation period, because there are some very glaring things. And the number 1 thing was about the lack of reporting. So since I've been the elected official, I've always stayed to having weekly meetings with the manager. Weekly meetings, 1 hour, and that's my focus. I don't really do much outside of that. And then also the agenda briefing, because as chair of the meeting, we meet with the attorney, the city clerk, and we actually go through the agenda to make sure that we have a very efficient run meeting. So those are the 2 meetings that we have. And the challenges with getting information and making sure those are efficient. So we've set up agendas, follow-up emails. I know there was a point about the line of communication. This commission actually did address that in 2 ways. Number 1, we put in the budget for legislative aid to assist the commission. which is now being removed in this budget, completely removed from the city. There's no legislative aid in our budget moving forward. And then the second thing was a action list. After every commission meeting, we have our legislative aid and clerk's office send out an action list of all the requests that we have as a commission to make sure that we're very clear about this is what the commission want and this is what we need. And do a public records request, look at those responses for yourself because the request for information is very lacking. I did a public records request to ask for all the reports and memos submitted to the Financial Oversight Board in regards to this meeting and also in the past, and I didn't receive anything. So looking at Mr. Hunter's report, I see a lot of information that I'm seeing for the first time. And we're the commission here on the ground. I have a lot of respect and appreciation for the work that the Financial Oversight Board, Chief Inspector General will do. But we are the elected officials here in this city. This is our city. This is our challenges. We live here. We breathe this. We should be getting those reports just as equally as strongly as anyone else. And that is a big issue. The other thing was about timing. One of the 3 reasons, if you pull up the documentation from that special commission meeting, there was clear documentation about why I would go to that extreme extent. Because remember, been one of the foremost champions of making sure that we have a stable management here in this commission. And I've been working with this board for a lot of recommendations. I make sure that we push to have those addressed in our commission meetings. You will see our requests for updates during the commission meetings for the manager for our 4 major challenges. It's focused on finance. So it was a big deal to make that move and decision to move that forward. And it wasn't just out of nowhere, out of personal, whatever made it be. It was the number one, lack of reporting, and then also the timing. It is the timing of our manager. It is very known throughout the city that we have very little, we barely see the manager in the city. All right. That is a problem. And I know that you may get reports from Tallahassee, but here in the city, we need to be clear about the presence because it's important for directors and staff, everyone to be here. So over a year ago, I asked for accounting of leave time. I did not receive it until a few weeks ago. When I finally received that accounting of that leave time after a second request, it didn't line up with the emails that we received. That, along with the lack of time that we see, the lack of reporting, and some of these objectives made it very clear that we need to have a very serious conversation with our performance of our highest paid person and leader and CEO of this city. And that's why that meeting was called, so that we can have that conversation and be very clear about time and leave time. And then there was also a lot of false accusations about the mayor being involved in day-to-day. Which is something that if all y'all know that I'm not going to be doing in trouble for nobody. That is not happening around here. I'm very clear about that. But you will see in emails, in meetings, there was a lot of false accusations. When I request information during our police chief search, it was not provided to us. Request information assistance with a COVID testing site when interacting with the congresswoman about getting dollars for the city. The lack of responses that we're receiving, and then the false accusation of me being involved in day-to-day by following up on these requests was just too much. So I wanted to bring that clearly because I think the last thing I would like is to see if you would entertain some type of, in our budget, an internal, and this is something, an internal operations auditor on a monthly or within our budget, to where we can have very clear objectives laid out by our manager, laid out in our budget, and that internal operation auditor makes sure that all those things are running throughout the whole city and the staff. So those are some of the things I think we need to do in order to move this city forward. And I would strongly encourage you to take into consideration these things, these investigations into our budget, our finance, our HR, code enforcement, building and licensing, and also into the manager's office to make sure that we are getting what we as taxpayers deserve as a city. So thank you very much for your time today. And I look forward to more frequent meetings so that we can get out of this finance crisis. So Mr. Ross, I really appreciate your advocacy and really letting us know that we need to get out of this financial oversight. Like that is fundamental, but there's some very clear objectives that we need to make. And it's the finance department is the key in doing that. So thank you very much for all your time and work and sacrifices you are making to be on this board and really move this city together. Thank you.
Mayor, thank you so much. Do we have any other comments? We have somebody at the dais.
Good morning. Are we still in morning? Okay. Good morning. I'm looking this way. Okay. Veronica Williams, the newly elected vice mayor of the great city of Opa-locka. I want to first thank the Financial Emergency Board for all the recommendations that was provided this morning. I also want to thank our city manager. Thank you. Personally, I want to thank you. We all thank you for not only starting from scratch, moving this city forward to where we are now. The Financial Emergency Board just gave you kudos for all that you've done. I want to thank the staff for providing disaggregated data and reports to the state, all of City of Opa-locka staff, to not only the commission, to the state, and to the residents. We see that we can do better. We've heard the recommendations. We see a clear and succinct plan that has been laid out. And I do believe that it is within all of our intentions as an entire city that we will move this city out of financial oversight and into a better day. So I make a pledge to work cohesively with everyone, the financial oversight, JLAC, the Auditor, Inspector General, to the residents, to the staff, to our commission, because we are one commission, that we move into a better day, that we completely eliminate all of our 99 findings and move out of the fact that we don't need anyone else but ourselves to make decisions and to move our city forward. So I want to thank again the Financial Oversight Committee, the state of Florida, Brian Hunter. I don't know everyone's name because I haven't officially met everyone on the board, but I totally agree with some of the recommendations. I know that we will move to make those recommendations into fruition. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
I am also a newly elected official here in the great city of Opa-locka. And I want to say thank you to the Oversight Committee, to the Financial Service Board for giving us information as newly elected officials that we can sponge off of and rake in. I too want to say I show my support to the manager, to staff for the great work that we have done. I'm not here to point fingers and throw blame on anybody, because at the end of the day, we are one city, we are one team, and we have one goal, and that's to make sure that Opa-locka lives up to that name as the great city. So I again want to say thank you to staff and to the residents. We got your back because you voted us in. So we're going to make sure that we do our part. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. Not sure if there's any other commissioners in the audience.
Chairman Collins, there are no other commissioners in the audience, but you do have public.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We'll move to that section of the agenda now. We'll open it up for public comments if anybody cares to come up.
Good afternoon to everyone. I am a former commissioner for the city of Opa-locka. And on the behalf of some of our citizens that are in attendance, we do publicly apologize for some of the previous comments on our behalf. The state of Florida have given us a clear recommendation suggesting of what we should be doing. I wasn't sure, was I in a commission meeting or a financial emergency meeting? But since now I look at the agenda, I'm in the right place at the right time. What I would like to say is we commend the Finance Emergency Board meeting, and we too have some concerns. But first of all, we would like to congratulate our commission, our city manager, and our citizens for putting up for this mess. Absolutely mess. When you couldn't get it done through legislation, you come now to a finance meeting to spell out details. We are not going to accept it because we are smarter than a fifth grader. This is not a strong mayor governance, and according to the charter. Although I know this new commission will be amending the charter, but until now, we are governed by what is on record. I am so appreciative that you're not into time constraint because the 3 minutes would have been over for the previous third speaker. I am so appreciative to the board for your agenda structure. Why? Because you gave the detail and now there's an opportunity for the public to make comments. And so far, I haven't been cut off or been ruled or the mic haven't been mute. My question to the board, where can I find the link and your minutes of your presentation because it's great. And I think it need to be archived on the city website. I think there is a strong, and not only I have an opportunity to speak to many citizens, but I truly think there is a hidden secret strategy to defund public safety, which is our police department. And I ask this board, please, not let it go through pay plan and start taking away position. And I know it won't happen as long as we have the city manager, but I know how some positions came apart that was not a part of the charter. And I also know when it's election time, how positions get deleted. Let me give you an IE. The charter only addressed 3 appointed officials. All 2 have a contract. That means the city manager and the third party attorney. But if you go back and look at risk management, the clerk doesn't have one. I wonder why. I was appointed and approved to be on the audit committee. And Mr. Manager, it's not your deal to call the meeting. It's up to the chair. Although you take the whipping, I'm a taxpayer. I'm not going to take it. So we are going to be meeting on April the 11th for the second time. I don't know why. I noticed that as I served as a commissioner, vice mayor, and interim mayor, there's a lot of legislation now come through resolution and not ordinance. See, when you do an ordinance, it allows public hearing. When you do a resolution with all different items, you can only talk 3 minutes, and if you don't get cut off, it's time for you to go. So I am going to commend this voice for many other citizens to say, you know what, we're on the right track. I told the city manager when he came in, you better get your contract. Because when the day comes when you're not in agreement, you're going to be gone. And let me tell you, it's not going to end just like this. They're going to keep inching until they find reasons. But I think we got at least 3 strong individual thinkers that would do the right thing without influence. So I leave with this. We didn't get like this overnight. We know what we need to do. I am not a part of the team to resolve the city. And for anyone that I know that got the petition going around to dissolve the city, I think it's enough of us that are intelligent to say, you know, let us try ourselves. So I would like to conclude by saying, may God bless the state of Florida, the committee, Frank, Mr. Patterson, all. Don't give up on us. This is our second time around. And when I came in office in 2002, we was in bad shape. And within 3 years, we were out of it through accountability and transparency. May God bless you.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, please.
Chairman Collins, there are no other public speakers.
Excellent. Well, at this time on the agenda, I want to open up the floor for any financial emergency board members who may have additional comments or thoughts as we start to wrap up the meeting.
Mr. Collins, Chair Collins, I just want to make a comment that I appreciate all of the work that Brian and the CIG staff put into that presentation that they did earlier today. I didn't have many questions because you provided a lot of the detail and the background and the reasons. And then the questions that I did have, the other members were able to unmute their lines quicker than me to ask them. So just to let you know that we all do appreciate the effort that went into providing that information so we could make good decisions on what we voted on today. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. I definitely second that notion as well. So I don't know that there's a whole lot of other comments from the board members, so I'll just wrap it up quickly and then we can officially adjourn. I really appreciate everybody's time and energy, commission staff, commissioners, all of our board members, the CIG staff, the citizens. You know, this really is part of what it takes to actually operate, and it can be a little messy, but this is in fact what we call, you know, our process of governing. And honestly, we wouldn't have it any other way. This is in fact what I started out with earlier today, saying that we love the process. And it's through this process that we get to good governance. And as we've heard today, you know, we're on amazingly good track. Good progress has been made in the city. We're going to continue to make good progress. And over the next course of our few meetings, we're going to continue to outline what it takes, in fact, to get out of financial emergency. As Frank indicated, that is the ultimate goal of our convenings, and we're well on our way. We have solid budgets. Audits are being completed, you know, staffing being looked at. You know, we're hitting some major program milestones. Everything is headed in the right direction. And for that, I feel amazingly grateful to everybody's hard work, and know that, you know, much like the citizens and the staff on the ground, we're here with you, and we'll continue to be so until we can, in all good faith, tell our governor that this is ready and a complete process, at which time you will be able to get out of financial emergency status. And like I say, we're well on our way. So with that, we will continue to look at today's documentation. We'll provide some of these presentations as requested and get back with you shortly as to our next convening. So until then, thank you so much and keep up the great work. Have a good afternoon.
You too now.
Thank you.